Steve Buscemi, who portrays Seymour, before acting, he was a firefighter in New York City during the early 1980s. And the day after 9/11, he returned with some of his firefighting crew to pick up the debris of the World Trade Center. And if there wasn't enough reason to love Steve Buscemi already, like, that's pretty fucking brave.
I think that Willie and Nic can help us see that there are many different ways we can express ourselves. We can do things like these podcasts that are amusing as a sort of light entertainment. Or we could do work that is more serious in scope and feeling and that deals with issues, emotional, spiritual, political, of great importance. Welcome to Additional Crew, the spoiler-heavy review show where we choose whatever random film we want to talk about. This episode we bring to you. This film follows two unconventional best friends who, after finishing high school, prank a man by answering his personal ad in the paper, leading to a series of increasingly messy complications in their lives. I am, of course, talking about Terry Zwigoff's pre-9/11 film, Ghost World.
Just barely.
We're talking weeks. It was nominated for the Best Writing, based on previous material Oscar, which it ultimately lost to A Beautiful Mind. It was also up against Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the King, and Shrek.
That's a stacked lineup if you take out A Beautiful Mind.
It's so funny because, I was looking at him like the one that's the weak link here to me is A Beautiful Mind. Give it to Shrek, honestly. Like,
I would agree with that. I mean, I could go on a Shrek tangent in every single one of these videos, but I will say that the writing for a kids movie was so ahead of its time for that. I would give it to Shrek.
And if you think like, oh, that sounds ridiculous, go watch Shrek again. I dare you not to be impressed with how actually complex it is underneath it all.
The writing really is what stands out to me, honestly. The jokes, of course, that's part of the writing, but the writing is really the highlight of Shrek for me, I think.
Well, okay, so Shrek aside, and before we jump into any of that, let me introduce our co-hosts. I'm Nick. I'm ashamed to admit that I do not own any 78s. And with me is Willie. Willie, are there any artifacts that you collect that you feel alienate you?
See, I have not really been super into collecting things in my adulthood, but when I was a kid, I will preface this by saying that I was homeschooled through middle school. So the answer to that question is yes, many things I collected alienated me. I think one that stands out that I still have, I keep the collection in my room, is when I was a kid, I was obsessed with collecting figurines of miniature presidents. Probably about maybe 5 inches tall. And there was this classic collection that came out, and my dad had probably 15 or 16 of the presidents, and I was obsessed about finding them or looking to complete the collection. And then for my, I think, 11th birthday, my parents got me the complete collection, which went up until the Nixon administration, I want to say. Yeah, up until Nixon, and they stopped making this specific collection. But I was so ecstatic at 11 years old, and I have such sentimental feelings for these presidential figurines that they're still in my room.
That's wild. Nixon killed is another thing. Did you have a favorite president that you had?
Yeah, I was always into John Kennedy. I think I liked the tragicness. I was a little hyperfixation on the JFK assassination. And I think the reason they stopped with Nixon might just be because the early iterations, I believe, contained lead. And I think it was around the 70s they stopped making these figurines. I haven't looked into exactly what year the collection I have came out. I think it's a reprint or something like that. But I guess I have not been chewing on them.
Good.
Eating the president, so I might have some slight lead contamination there. But
Nixon gave you lead contamination. I mean, what a better headline in the future.
Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. Most of the collections that I have that would have alienated me in the past luckily have become popular again. I remember when I started collecting records, it was right before people were into them. So you could get anything for $2, right? And it's oh, this is sick stuff. So either I was jumping on the wave early or, whatever. But then it was cool. So luckily, here we are. And then I also did the same thing with VHS prior to it getting popular again. I was collecting VHS because I'm just all about bang for buck, right? 25 cents for a tape is awesome. And then all of a sudden you're online, and they're oh, it's $30 for one. It's like, okay, well, if I'm going to spend that over a DVD or a Blu-ray, what am I doing?
I feel like VHS tape collection, like, I mean, as time goes on, like DVD collection and even Blu-ray collection will also be kind of this cool, like, relic to the past kind of thing. But I feel like a VHS collection, just based on the size of the box of tapes come in, I think it's more aesthetically pleasing than DVD collections.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it depends, I guess, but like, I don't know. There's something like cool about having a collection and just having like the bigger font of the VHS case, and it looks cooler. It looks more like a bookcase kind of collection.
I would agree with that. It was the same argument made with vinyl back then when vinyl started costing as much as a CD, right? And everyone's like, "Oh, why would you do that?" It's like, well, I mean, it's just the physical presence of it, right? Like if we're talking about CD versus an MP3 that you can download, the CD sounds better, sure, but the physical presence is just a
little tiny little square. Like with a vinyl, you have the smell of it, the feel of it, and like it's just bigger cover art of it. I think, yeah, makes sense.
The one thing I will say with DVDs that I love is I love DVD collection sets. So that way that, I can get every sequel to Hellraiser that's not like the first two on one little set. So I don't have to waste shelf on terrible movies that I still want to have hanging around, Like I know they're bad, and it's so nice to have all of them in one little thing.
I'm gonna ask you this, Nick, real quick, just because we're talking about collections and stuff. And this was something that was always in the back of my head, and I recently just had a recommended YouTube video that was like pulled this out of my brain. Apparently, other people were upset about this. But did you collect the Simpsons box sets when they came out? They started releasing these in like 2004, maybe.
So I didn't collect them when they came out, but when they were releasing up to like season 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, around there, I worked at a record store that stocked DVDs and Blu-rays as well. So I'm very familiar with exactly what you're about to say, I'm pretty sure. So, but I know what you're talking about. Like,
the first 5 seasons were like different colors. They feature the Simpsons family. And then season 6, Fox and the creators decided to put out season 6 in this like large plastic yellow Homer head. And it was completely aesthetically different than the first 5 seasons. It doesn't fit. It's like completely different than any other DVD packaging, not just in The Simpsons, but in general. And it completely threw off the collection. And then in season 7, they just went back to the original format. So every Simpson collection has this giant plastic Homer head, and it just doesn't work at all. And me as a kid, and apparently it was a whole thing in there. I watched this whole video about it.
Here, bear with me one second. I'm going to go grab these because I do have these ones.
Okay. And it's just funny because like even as a kid, when I was just excited to, watch The Simpsons, that's how I like got into The Simpsons, because when I was born, they were in like season 8, season 7. So I discovered The Simpsons by getting them off DVD. And even as a kid, like who was just there to consume The Simpsons, I was just thrown off by how it looked. And it just upset me as a kid, and it stayed with me all these years.
So first off, I'm going to show you what the normal ones look like. And this is season 9, right? So this isn't the early ones. This is season 9. But yeah, it's just a normal large case, whatever.
Same size as the others, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which, great, fits on the shelf, awesome. If you want to look at the other ones, it's this, right? And I get why it could be cool in a way, but let me tell you this much, okay? Working at the record store and also having it now at home, it doesn't fit on the shelf.
It doesn't, no, at all. It's not even, it's cheap as plastic, too.
It's the 6, 7, and 8 they did this way. And then they went back and re-released 7 and 8. And the 6, 7, and 8 are, of course, in my opinion, really the best seasons.
I agree, yeah.
So if you want the best seasons, you got to deal with that. No, working at the record store would always annoy me because you couldn't have them standing up on their own and they couldn't be anywhere because they always fall over no matter what. So you have to bookend them between 2 different other seasons.
Yeah.
Which great if you have all the seasons, but if you don't, it's diabolically annoying.
Yeah, it's such a universal experience, and it's so funny. It's funny, like collections, and like even like one of my presidents. This isn't usually something that bothers me, but like one of the presidents, I think it's Harry Truman, is missing an arm. So when I line them all up, it just throws me off. It just doesn't fit.
Harry Truman missing an arm. Okay. Maybe insensitive question. Does FDR come in a wheelchair?
No, he doesn't, but he's wearing a cape for some reason. Okay. I don't know why.
We'll give him something different. That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and the collection that shamed me the most, in case you're wondering, is I collect random knickknacks that look like they're vaguely spooky. and that is
Mhm.
things like not Janice, my partner. She collects dolls that are like they're terrifying, and they are terrifying. But I collect things that look like people made them, and
Hmm.
like they didn't come out the way they wanted, or that like over the years they've been weathered in such ways that they're just awful. So like, um, take like I found this like little baby that's like from the 20s and it's got like string inside of it, but all of its like hair has been singed off, so it looks like it's burned in the head, and it just looks terrifying. And so anytime I see something like this, I'll just pick it up because I'm like, well, that's a random artifact. So if I'm gonna get haunted, for sure, but also like it takes the right sort of person, because some people come over, look at that stuff, and be like, what's wrong with you, man?
I would like that. I It's kind of cool because there's a variety to that sort of collection. You know, you can find
Mm-hmm.
something like that anywhere. You're not just going to a specific thrift store to maybe find this to add it. You could find it on the street.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I found one, and this was a story that I haven't told many people. And I'm sorry if you're here for Ghost World. We are going to go on for just a couple more minutes. I was cleaning off the roof because I finally bought my own ladder, right? And I was cleaning off the roof of the rental I live in because I probably should have done that years ago. But I get up there and there is a Barbie doll on top of the roof, and it's had to have been there for decades
Whoa.
because the feet are cones. They're burned off at the bottom. Half the back is like split. There's no hair anywhere. And of course, it's not wearing any clothes. And it looked cursed. And so, of course, I take it off the roof and it's in the collection now because I'm not going to get rid of that thing. That thing looks terrifying. It looks absolutely the worst. It's like 12, 15 years of just direct elements.
In
Um,
the over like all the elements, and it's been there longer than you have, so it's be disrespectful to not keep it.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I don't know, man. Maybe bringing it down is going to bring something bad on this house, but I have to bring it down. I can't just leave it up there. And it is on display, so at least it knows it's cared for. If you have any objects giving off energy in your life,
You saved it, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
in a way.
And I say that all as someone who is not very spiritual. However, when you find something like that, you got to just respect the world.
Barbie in the gutters.
Exactly. I've seen too many movies at this point. Okay, so Ghost World. Terry Zwigoff. This is his second film, I believe, right? Follow up to the documentary Crumb, which, Willie, if you want to give a little bit of backstory on Crumb and how it kind of catapulted this guy's career.
Yeah, so Terry Zwigoff, he made the film Crumb about his friend or acquaintance. I'm not sure how close they were. It's a documentary released in 1994, and this came out when Zwigoff was in his early 40s. He had no like reputation in Hollywood or the film industry before that. He was, I think, living like on a friend's couch, and he was broke, and like he just was pretty much a nobody. And he made this movie, rather, this documentary about Robert Crumb, who is a renowned counterculture artist who created Fritz the Cat and a lot of cartoons in the 60s and 70s, kind of coming up along the same time as like the the hippie movement. Crumb's art style kind of is hippie adjacent, psychedelic adjacent, but basically like he's his own person to say the least. And the documentary is maybe my favorite documentary I've ever seen. It's just a bizarre gonzo look into this man's life, and this man lays everything out on the table. He's extremely vulnerable. It's extremely disturbing, funny, sad, hilarious, just incredible. Not only from like a journalistic standpoint, but from a filmmaking standpoint. It's just so well shot, so well paced. Just fascinating figure. When Zwigoff releases this film in 1994, people know obviously who Robert Crumb is, but like it kind of just makes him into this like folk hero in a sense. Like it makes him even more popular. And it gets rave reviews, and like it kind of catapults Zwigoff into the Hollywood mainstream in a way. But then he takes 7 years off, and he does not release another film until this film Ghost World, which came out in 2001. And this is his follow up project, and it's his first film that isn't a documentary. I think he made short films in the past, but this is like his first debut feature film.
Yeah. Okay. And so we tap into that here. So what you're watching is someone who hasn't really ever dabbled into the fiction, going into fiction in the way that it's a major release with some actual big name actors attached to it.
Yeah.
So, one thing you'll notice is different about this pod if you listen to the other ones before is I'm going to go over some of the technical aspects of this before we get into the story, because I think we take a lot of time on the story. It's going to be a great one on this one too. So let's talk first off about some of the more technical stuff. Let's talk about soundtrack, music, etc. I think sound is a huge part of this movie, as evidenced by starting off with the piece that they did. I want to try to pronounce the name of the piece they did, but I just feel like I'm going to just destroy it anyways. So there's not really a reason, but the masked dance number in the beginning, all
Mhm.
of the Delta blues ragtime that they showed off, there was a clear like reverence for finding music that's underappreciated, especially during this time,
Mhm.
and kind of showing it off in this movie, uh, which also fits with kind of like the personalities of the people at the time. The soundtrack was, I think, phenomenal. Um, and at the same time, I wanted more. I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more in your face.
Yeah, it did. There really wasn't any distinct needle drops that were outside of a narrative. I think I forget what song the closing song is. I forget the name off the top of my head. I can look it up. But that was like the only song in the movie that stood out to me that was completely separate from a narrative. Because like even in the opening dance number, like it's Enid, the main character, is watching the movie that the song is coming off of, and she's dancing to it, or like she's listening to a blues record in her room, and that's where the needle drop of the song playing is coming from. It's there's a relation to the character, which I think is really cool. But I agree, like as much as there is talk about music and soundtracks in this movie, we don't really get a lot of music. And I think
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I agree. I think it could add some more if we got a little bit, just out of curiosity, like personal preference.
Yeah, it was curious to me because one of the first things that's sold on this film, and this isn't fair because that's a little bit of bias coming into it, right? Is that it is featuring these really underground needle drops, and this is Criterion selling it to me this way, so I don't know. But then you hear it, it's like, well, if you want ragtime and the Delta blues, that's exactly what is happening, I suppose. Although I think in 2001, in particular, that time there was kind of a movement with Delta blues, weirdly enough, with White Stripes and like the Black Keys and other ancillary bands kind of getting popular at that
Getting
time.
yeah. Another artist that I grew up with around this time was R.L. Burnside. My dad played a lot of his music, and he's been big since like the '60s, if not before that. But he really blew up in more or less of a mainstream kind of way. Not mainstream, but like in the like late '90s, early 2000s, he released some records that had blues and some more modern influence, and that's that kind of like
Mm-hmm.
around the same era as the White Stripes and others as well.
Yeah, see, so it tracks for me that this would also be in there. It's just it's interesting to me because again, I didn't feel like there was anything in here that was like, wow, they're really using music in the way that I would expect these obscure needle drops to be used. Meanwhile, the soundtrack is good. I just think it was a little bit underutilized because at the same time we're talking about like Wes Anderson's coming out with music and like, or he's not coming out with music, but he's basically making music videos in video, you
Yeah,
know. And then to have one that's so much about music and tout it for the music, then show it off in a different way, felt, it's hard for me because I'm like, maybe there's artistic merit to not doing that, and I'm sure that there is a lot. However, the potential's there.
the potential's there. I agree. I think that this almost feels like a movie that deserves like a soundtrack, like an official released soundtrack.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and yeah, I think I'm trying to think of parts in the movie where like music might have. I don't know if there's specific scenes where it would have a scene needed music, but like there's certainly scenes that could have used music that would have been interesting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And for me, we hear a lot of Delta blues. I think we needed to hear more ragtime, especially with how much it's talked about. Because one thing I will say with the soundtrack, and this bleeds over to the story a little bit, is that Seymour, being an avid collector of 78s at the time that are mostly Delta blues, okay, but then him throwing in the early jazz and ragtime,
Mm-hmm.
being a ragtime collector for 78s in 2001 has to be the most alienating collection you could have in the world. I was actually really impressed by the fact that this was where they went because I was like, wow, I worked at a record store for a lot of years, and I'll tell you one thing that I never had anyone ask me for was a
Uh,
ragtime 78. People did ask about shellacs, right? Which is like the same thing, 78s. Not one person was ever looking for ragtime. Blues, yes. Ragtime, no. And there's crossover, but kudos to them.
it,
But
it,
I'd also
it
love to hear some really good ragtime tracks.
it makes the character more like if if he was just like a big blues fan that like is all he listened to, like it would have made him seem kind of weird and offbeat. But the fact that it's blues and ragtime is for two, that it definitely adds to the character. I agree. I kind of would have liked to see maybe more of Enid's, niche music taste. Like we get her playing a punk song in her room when her dad walks in, but I can't recall off the top of my head the song, but I think I recognize it. It wasn't a particularly niche song, or at least the sound wasn't. So maybe if we got like a little bit more into her character and what she listened to before meeting Seymour, and then you kind of see like her music taste shift as she becomes friends with him, it might have been interesting. There's potential there to insert some of her music taste.
Agreed. And I just think that there's more potential there for it, really. Like Enid was interesting because it seemed like her music taste was just kind of whatever was kind of an off brand of who the person she kind of wants to be around.
Yeah.
She didn't want to listen to what they listened to, but she wanted to listen to what would be ancillary to what they would listen to. So she could then be like, well, yeah, I listen to this cooler thing than what you listen to, or this different thing than what you listen to.
Yeah. And like consistently not mainstream.
Yeah, exactly. No matter what, it can't be the mainstream version of it. Like with the punk song, and it's definitely, I think it's the Buzzcocks, if I remember right. It's the What Do I Get song, right? Which is like really early punk. And of course, now more people know about it because the internet's big. But you have to remember, this is really like public adaptation of the internet, and having that song be the punk song she chose, of course, is just to go in and be like, I know more about this thing than you do, and it's kind of like the hipster mindset. But okay, I'm gonna shelf that conversation because we're gonna get into that during the story and theme. So let's talk about cinematography and creativity for a second. I have what's gonna sound like a harsh opinion, and I don't mean it to be as maybe pejorative as the words I'm about to say are. Mm-hmm. This movie feels like a lot of it is the cinematography by Cool Stuff.
In terms of like depiction, what they depict?
Yeah, like it's replacing maybe like really complex compositions in photos with just throwing a whole bunch of cool shit into the frame.
It sounds very similar to the movie Crumb, honestly. And now that you point that out, I see a parallel there. There's a lot of shots in that are just like, they're not really technically proficient, but they add to the story. But kind of a similar idea. And the cool shots in particular that really drive the narrative for me are just the wardrobe is so cool. Like I was reading this comment that Becca's character, like her taste in the beginning mirrors Enid's, and she gradually becomes more and more like not really basic, but just like it changes. Her character like develops and becomes more mature, more like adult, and then in the end she's like wearing like business casual clothes. Well, Enid's is just like super cool, fun wardrobe, but it's just consistently changing, and it's cool. It's fun to track.
And like I said, I don't want that to sound negative, because whoever's putting together these set designs, the costume design, like deserves their flowers on this, because they found the cool stuff and they have made it look interesting, right? And like finding where to place these things is awesome. And the color compositions are really good. I don't think that you see red used as a color so heavily in a lot of films. And this one, red was definitely like the main color from what I could tell.
Red and green. There's a good amount of greens in her clothes. Of course, she dyes her hair green. Seymour's apartment has a lot of greens, but I agree that red is another major standout.
And it's like those are good colors to just work with, especially when you have a bunch of cool looking things that are red and green. But other than that, I mean, with cinematography itself, there were shots that were good for me. There was nothing that really like blew me away as far as, wow, this is beautiful. But there was a lot of stuff that when I was looking at it, I was like, that's some cool stuff that they got there.
The production design in particular. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I did like the shot when Seymour and Enid finally hook up of it going down to the cowboy, like riding his horse. But of course, it looks like he's thrusting because that's what's going on. I love that little scene. And then almost any time that they were showing off old artwork looked really cool, or any of the books of the artwork that they had, also really cool.
Yeah.
it's hard for me because I don't want to sound super negative on cinematography because I'm not. Having the cool shit, knowing where to put it, and having the cool pictures and knowing where to put them is a skill. So I did like the cinematography overall on this film quite a bit.
It wasn't like particularly special. Yeah, it's probably the way I would put it. And the one scene that I did like the cinematography a lot, or at the very least it was engaging and caught my interest immediately, was the opening scene where she's in her bedroom and you get the shots of the different neighbors' apartments and kind of the frantic camera work that still works as is a hook to the audience in a way. It wasn't like the most technically proficient, but it did a good job of expressing chaos while still conveying something about her character, I thought.
And it brought you from like that movement of the original dancing into this film without sacrificing a lot of the energy or just like hard cutting you into something slower.
Yeah, exactly. Even though the next scene is a lot slower with them in the graduation, it still works because the opening shot is conveying something about the character. It's establishing the character without being overly like, uh, explanatory in a way.
Mm-hmm. And there's so many layers on each one of these pictures because of the cool stuff. So like as you're watching, and let's talk about Enid's like bedroom because you're in her bedroom a lot, right? There's always something cool hanging out in the background. Like I love one of the later scenes after you think you've seen it all, and then there's that cool lit up waterfall picture, which is so tacky, but it works because everything in this room is so eclectic that tacky is just something that can stand out above the rest as being even more tacky at this point is a feat.
Yeah.
So it works.
I think I recall what you're talking about, and I think I like that because it wasn't in the beginning. It was like once you already kind of know her character, there's like other little pieces to pick out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My question with all this is, and this is 2001, so thrift stores hadn't become stupidly expensive yet, but how much money is her dad giving her?
It's a good point, and it seems like a lot of the stuff she maybe has had for a while, but at the same time, she is like a teenager. So her interests are always changing. She's not consistent as a character. We'll talk about that obviously, but it does seem like there's a good amount of stuff that when something does hook her and interest her, she like wants to consume it. Like getting records or all these things. So it has to be at least somewhat substantial because she doesn't seem to have any source of income at all.
No, this is the pre-2011 thing again we're talking about. The ability to try to think you can move out and be roommates with someone without even a job that you've been in for more than like a week.
Yeah.
One clever use of the cinematography that I liked was when they zoomed in on her hair dye when she was redying her hair black, and it was the funky hair dye, of course. And the scene just prior, she had her classmate or ex-classmate, I suppose, come in and say, "Wow, don't you like that? It sure is funky." And she goes, "Hey, well, what does she think she is, black?" And then she uses the funky hair dye in the next scene.
Yeah. I didn't catch that. That's good.
It's clever stuff like that where it points out the hypocrisy of also what's going on, while at the same time, like showing the depth to what's happening. It's good because it doesn't give you this feeling it doesn't give me this feeling anyways that the director is trying to give you a hint at what version of the world he thinks is better. Instead, he is showing you and portraying this little slice of life of this person.
Exactly. And yeah, and I like that. I like that piece. There's a lot of little subtle moments with kind of pointing out her hypocrisy or Seymour's, and I like that in terms of shots and stuff. Although if we're going to talk about cinematography, I think by far the masterwork in this film would be, of course, Mir Father Mir.
Yeah. Okay. Mir Father Mir was shown during the remedial art class. And I have the name of the character pulled up here. Let's see. It is Roberta, the teacher, played by Ileana Douglas. It's her film, according to this, and it is a doll being torn apart in a bathroom sink, and blood kind of just a little bit in there, in front of a mirror, and like some creepy looking house shots throughout.
Is she putting it like in the toilet or the bathtub?
I thought it was like a nasty bathroom sink, like an old messed up one, but I could be wrong about that.
It's something in the bathroom, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's I loved it because it was just so out there and like definitely something you could see someone making for a short film video, where there's like mirror, father, mirror, and it's like, okay, they're definitely trying to teach you about trauma here, and it works in a base way, and it looks cool. So okay, I'm in.
Yeah, it's so stupidly pretentious, but it's funny in the movie itself because it shows that the director kind of has an idea of like what a very stupid pretentious art film would look like. There's that self-awareness there that I like.
Exactly. And there's a lot more of that I suppose we'll end up talking about here in a little bit, because some of my favorite scenes are in this remedial art class. But let's talk about editing real quick before we move on to anything else. The editing on this film, so it's just a hair under 2 hours. I have a hard time with the opinion because it felt a little bit longer than its runtime to me. And at the same time, I'm trying to think of what you could cut, and I feel like the answer is all of it and none of it.
I think the runtime is sufficient for the character's development, and that's the tricky part. But I do agree that like on paper, like reading the plot and knowing the characters, like this could have been like a very zippy 90-minute film, and you probably, with a talented director like Zwigoff, could have done that in a shorter runtime, because it really feels like a 90-minute movie just based on what it is, very slice of life. I will say that like my criticism of the pacing, I do have some criticisms of the pacing being slow, but as an audience member, at least I feel like I'm rewarded by the jokes and like the dialogue that comes from the pacing. So when a scene starts to drag or maybe feels like it could be cut, at least like I'm engaged. I think that was there's kind of like a trade-off there where it's like, okay, some of the scenes just, you get the character development, you get like what you want out of a scene, and it's still kind of just going on and they're still having conversations, but at least the conversations are funny and I'm engaged.
Agreed. And it's hard for me, because looking at them, like there's so many areas where you could say, okay, sure, cut this scene, cut that scene, cut this scene, cut that scene. But the kind of layering of these people's characters is the whole entire movie, right? So you could cut it and maybe not lose much. Like there are a few different relationships in this film that don't need to be explored in the way they are, I think, but also they provide good juxtapositions for what we're seeing from Enid, and it helps really show how Enid is not only being alienated by outside forces, but also is staying in without change in her area, and that's also alienating herself. And without that kind of texture, it would be harder to understand that. Like it'd be easier to point the finger one way or the other instead of seeing how it's a two-way street.
Exactly. And I think with that, I think the relationship character development that would suffer the most would be her friendship with Becca. And I think that because there are scenes that kind of go on and you get to see the contrast between her, conversations and time spent with Becca versus like the conversations and time spent with Seymour or her dad or things. I think that kind of like you said, juxtaposes the friendship between the two women leads. That I think that like I think it more authentically kind of shows a natural dissolving of their friendship over time, because you have those longer scenes where you get that development and that contrast between the relationships.
100%. Because that's the change of age, the coming of age part of this movie, right? Is that this is a relationship that through no one's fault is unraveling because school's over and you don't have that common thread anymore. You don't now, and it's kind of just falling apart. I'm sure everyone who's listening to this who's past high school has had friendships that way. We're like, I love that person. We don't hang out anymore because there's just nothing to talk about.
Just completely different people, and like it's like a time capsule kind of friendship. That's how I think of it, as a time capsule friendship, where you were friends in this particular time of your life because of the situation you were in and who you were at that time, and it's just like it's just meant to be in that moment. And I think that they're as annoying as the characters are at times, I think their friendship does feel very authentic. Even though you, as an audience member, can pretty early on see that they're drifting apart, it still makes sense that they're friends.
For me, like the ones I look at are like the relationship with her dad, and it's not Dana, her dad, and the person who comes back into his life.
What is it? It's not Edna. No, it's
it's not Deborah. There's like a lot of names that are floating around in my head around this. Maybe it is Deborah. No,
Deborah.
That doesn't feel right though. Anyway, not important. Not really, but the relationship between his dad and his ex, and then the ex moves back in, and you see that, and I'm like, okay, there's a little bit of time spent on this, and it's not a ton, but it feels like that might be one of the weaker points. However, it also shows that like it makes sense of the Norman parts, right? Because the Norman parts where he's on the bench, he's like, well, I can always count on you being here. It shows that it's true. The only people that aren't going to change are the people who can't even remember what day it is.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like everyone changes over time. Like there's this depth underneath all of this where it's like, okay, I have some issues with the editing and the pacing. However, I really don't know what straw you can pull out before collapsing the whole thing.
It does balance things very well, I think, and I think that it doesn't linger too long on side relationships, even though some of the scenes maybe do go on a little bit too long. I feel like those side relationships are what make the characters and their development as a whole authentic.
Yep.
You need that. You need even like the conversations of her and the guy on the bus who's waiting on the bus, like that brings the full circle, comes together at the end. So it's necessary to like really keeping everything in place. If you look at it as like kind of a puzzle, you can't take out a little piece.
Mm-hmm. The Dana and Seymour stuff, because we need to know that that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever get any feelings that Dana's role in this is shown sufficiently?
Yeah, I think it is, because we're getting the perspective is from Enid, and Enid, for complex reasons, is both, intrigued by Dana's presence in Seymour's life and off-put by it. And you're going to see her depicted as Enid wants to interpret her, I think.
Okay, I dig that. That was another one of those where I'm like, I can't tell if it needed more time or less time.
Well,
maybe it hit right. Yeah.
I think Dana's character is such a contrast to Seymour that, like, if you got any more depth into her character, would make the relationship between her and Seymour more confusing, because they already don't seem to fit. And like, if you just get surface level Dana, it makes sense,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So editing for you heard what I said. It's hard for me. Like, I feel like it could add things cut, but if you ask me exactly what, I couldn't give you an answer. The Jenga tower is too loose. It's a little scary. So, yeah, sufficient. Let's move on to our next little set. 5 things you likely did not know. And
go ahead, Nick.
Oh, that's good. I was gonna say and thank you, listeners, for putting up with us, because I did change the format this episode so we can get to this area a little bit faster. So, Willie, when you are ready, shoot it off.
All right, yeah. So first little thing you may not know is that Steve Buscemi, who portrays Seymour, he was before acting, he was a firefighter in New York City during the early 1980s. And shortly after, or actually, I believe it was the day after 9/11, which would have been about 6 weeks after this movie came out, he returned with some of his firefighting crew to pick up the debris of the World Trade Center. And if there wasn't enough reason to love Steve Buscemi already, like, that's pretty fucking brave.
And you have to understand, like, a lot of people who were around that stuff at that time got really sick afterwards, and I think that there was this understanding that this is not great or something else could happen. So coming back that quickly afterwards, it really is brave. Knowing what we know now, maybe it doesn't seem as much, but at the time, that was a scary situation. So, yeah. Steve Buscemi's awesome, man. He's awesome. Puts it out there.
Yeah, it's just the movie just came out, and he's like, he goes back to being a firefighter. Yeah,
straight up. Okay, the second fact you may not know. I'm going to say some words you may not like, but they're in the movie. So I promise you, I don't mean anything other than just what I'm going to say here. The Coon Chicken Inn was a real restaurant chain. It was founded in 1925 in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's a great place for something with that name, as you can imagine. Definitely wasn't. Anyway, the vintage photograph of Coon Chicken Inn shown in Seymour's scrapbook was an actual restaurant. However, it was in Portland, Oregon. It was located at Sandy Boulevard. The building's still there, although it doesn't look the same. It's been renovated. Trust me, they couldn't still have it looking the same. Everyone would know about that.
I used to drive past it all the time. I used to live 6 blocks from it.
It's like, if you could just make it not racist, it's a cool idea for a building in general, having a face on the front. Just like, come on. I was this is just a fun fact about me. I was raised in my youth in Utah, and I of course live in Oregon now. So there was like an odd intersection of things happening in this movie where I'm like, that sounds familiar, that looks familiar. I don't know what's going on, and you just find out. Oh, okay, I've just apparently moved to the two most racist places in the 20s. There we go. That's what happened.
And the picture that I think in the film Seymour shows is the Portland restaurant, I believe, because I recognized the photo and I was like, oh, I know that spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if any of what they showed was part of the Salt Lake City restaurant, but the name was the Salt Lake City restaurant. And then I don't
Yeah.
know if the Portland restaurant was what the name of the Portland restaurant was.
I'm like 80% certain it was also called the Goon Chicken Inn.
It's great. Uh, wonderful.
Next up, fun fact. So in Enid's art sketchbook, she has a bunch of depictions of Seymour and other characters. Some of the art, I don't know exactly which caricatures or images were, but some of the art was drawn by Sophie Crumb, who is the daughter of Robert Crumb, from the aforementioned documentary that Zwigoff made. And Sophie Crumb is also in the documentary Crumb. So it was a cool little anecdote that she reunited with the guy who exposed her family for this project. It's pretty cool.
Oh man, you gotta love that. Well, from my understanding, this isn't one of our fun facts, so this is just an extra. Terry and Robert were in a band together. So one of the records that was held up during the Saturday record sale was R. Crumb and his something something, and that was actually a real band with Terry and Robert Crumb. So
yeah,
there cool. had to have been some like major overlap there between the families to also get Sophie to make art for this afterwards.
I think, and kind of a tangent, but I think that Robert, his kind of feelings about the movie were mixed, but something that stood out about his feelings towards Terry in the movie is that his Terry portrayed his brother's artwork and like really showed it off in the movie, and he really appreciated that because his brother in the film tragically passed away shortly before the film's release, and he really appreciated the chance for his brother's artwork to be depicted in the film. Something that he really spoke highly of and held on to.
Sure, and I would imagine people who live very eccentric lives, like they may have blind spots, but they're not fully blind to their eccentricities. Not usually. Yeah. That's a full-blown delusion otherwise. Fun fact number 4. According to the director, Terry Zwigoff, Steve Buscemi was so uncomfortable playing the role of Seymour that whenever shooting was finished for the day, the first thing he would do was immediately change his clothes so that way he could look completely differently. And it's not expanded upon whether or not it was the ideation of his role or if it was the look or what was it. But something made Steve Buscemi feel so nasty playing this that he had to go change. And I think it could be any of the above, really, with this particular role.
I like to think he went home, and so also later in this year, the film Monsters Inc. was released. So I like to think that he went home and dressed up like Randall.
Yeah, he threw on his tank top from Airheads, and that's what he went through with. He's like every day. He's like, I need to look cool again. Let me look cool again for a second, please.
Fun fact number 5: the movie store clerk, who is very briefly in the film, but he's very distinct eyebrows and face. That actor's name is Patrick Fischler, and he was also in another iconic 2001 film, Mulholland Drive, directed by David Lynch. And I believe they were also released within a couple months of each other. But Fischler does not have a big role, but he's got a very distinct look, and he stood out immediately to me.
If you've only ever seen one scene from Mulholland Drive, you've seen Patrick Fischler. Because he is in the scene that is listed as one of the greatest jump scares of all time. And it's hard to argue because the buildup is just Fischler talking about a dream he had in which he's in the same place that he is in reality at that moment. And that he's leading them to a jump scare. So you get prepared for it, and it still hits you in such a way that only this particular version of mind bending can.
His facial expressions after the jump scare occurs in Mulholland Drive is also very distinct. Like it's part of like what lends to his I think distinct facial look is that his like reaction.
It's just great. He had such a 2001, like he not big roles in either of these movies, but he is exactly a face that you'll never not know if you see him. Like I could see this guy walking around and be like,
Yeah.
you're the dumpster witch guy. Which spoilers for Mulholland Drive. I apologize there a little bit.
You shouldn't have spoilers. You should go see Mulholland Drive.
You should go see Mulholland Drive. That didn't actually spoil it either. I don't think you can spoil it unless you have listened to our whole 2-hour podcast about it next time. Yeah. So those are the 5 things you likely did not know. So now let's jump into the heavier lifting of this film, as it is with a lot of these films, and for a good reason, because we're humans. These are about human experiences. Let's talk about the story. So Ghost World itself, I would say the story structure is pretty loose. It's not necessarily like A, B, C, this is the end of the film movie. It's coming of age. There's a lot of kind of pontification on what identity is and what it means to have certain identities. And I hesitate to call it any of one thing. And that's kind of fun for this movie. Like, it's not really a romance movie. I wouldn't call it that almost at all. But it's also not a romance movie, because romance is central to the plot of each thing. It's
certainly a relationship movie,
mm-hmm.
and the nuances, the complicatedness that comes with any kind of relationship.
And like growing up and how your identity is formed and how it changes and kind of what it means to be different than everyone else, what it means to be the same as everyone else. I like to look at Enid as a character that seems like is just boilerplate 100% oppositional defiance disorder as a person. She wants to be different than everyone else. And she sees different as cool, right? So like her whole entire thing is, if I want to be cool, then I need to just be different. But she's so focused on being cool and being different that she never really finds exactly what she's going for.
Exactly, and which it makes sense for her character, because she latches on so quickly to Seymour's weirdness that like she adopts that in
Mm-hmm.
an immediate kind of way. So it's like whoever around her in her circle that like appeals to that differentness, it's not her, it's not authentically her. She just sees it as like kind of opportunistic.
Which it's so interesting, because it's this idea that what can be more different than copying someone else who's different, and that sounds really harsh, but it's just a thing, right? It's like, if this is your goal, you're going to find examples of your goal no matter what. And Seymour's the perfect example, because he's I can't remember if they gave an age of him exactly, but I would say he's a 40-something dude who works at a record store, which in 2001, vinyl records, people did not want those things. 2001, you couldn't give them away. Again, I talked about collecting 78s of ragtime music in 2001. This guy wasn't the dude. I will tell you that much. Like, in one of my favorite things, this is a little bit of a segue, I suppose, but is the record collecting show that they went to kind of prove it. If you were like, that's not what record collectors would be like, 2001, oh, it sure is.
Yeah,
sure is. But with Enid, it's so fascinating. Just the first like 30 minutes, watching her change her personality like 4 different times, just based on what people are saying, and still having that feeling that she wants to be so different than everyone else, but she's just completely listening to everybody. I'm like blanking at the words right now on how to describe this, but it's just this like irony as your personality can't exist in a way that brings you closer to people.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, there's an irony involved. I mean, she's clearly like very contrarian, but at the same time, she's not, because maybe like mercurial, I guess. Maybe mercurial would be the right word. Just, kind of constantly shifting and changing. And it's funny, ironically, that, her character is all these different things at once, but it does feel so authentic, because that's just kind of the core piece of who she is. Like, it really gets the oppositional, defiant, insecure teenager, just graduated high school, lost, kind of stereotype down so well. I think that her character like is unauthentic as she is, it somehow makes her authentic.
Yeah, well, because like the hypocrisy isn't something that's not real, right? Like you can read this as a character with like a big gigantic hole in their writing, or you can read it as the hypocrisy of real life, where people
Mm-hmm.
present something and want to be something, but they can't exactly do that without also conforming in certain ways, right? And being so nonconformist, especially, I keep wanting to go back to 2001. So I was 11 years old, right? But like immediately after that, high school, around the same age as this character, maybe like 5, 6 years younger for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so much about conformity,
Mm-hmm.
like there's a meme song that I'm not going to recommend you checking out because it's very non PC nowadays. But there was like this song all about conforming by being emo, right? And the whole entire thing was like being non-conformist was how people tried to be cool.
Mm-hmm.
But by being non-conformist, they were conforming to everything else that was also non-conformist, right? And it was this big hypocrisy, big schism and dissonance in your head that you had to like put up with. And that's what we're seeing here, is what that looks
It's
like in a more real way.
and it's so fascinating too because like this movie, like I talked about before, how it's so perfectly pre 9/11, like 2001, is that like this character of Enid would not exist in a like unique way in during the time of the internet, because if she had been born 7 years later, she would just be on Tumblr and she'd be mimicking the things she sees on Tumblr and social media, and like having niche interests like listening to old blues records. Not most teenagers aren't doing that. Most teenagers are still conformist, but there's always going to be those outliers because there's spaces outside of your hometown where you can find those niche interests and like adopt that as part of your personality. But Enid is just going off of this like this backdrop. I want to mention this as well, is that this town where they live is purposely vague in every town USA kind of way. There's obviously like some weird characters and oddballs, and not everyone is conformist, but like the setting itself is so purposely like just every town USA, because I think it does a really good job of depicting that. Well, it's like, where is Enid getting this inspiration for being such a nonconformist weirdo? It's just the people she happens to stumble across that are odd, and she doesn't have the internet to, kind of like influence her opinions. So it's just funny that this movie really only could have come out in like early 2000s. It would not have been unique in 2009, 2010.
True, true. Yeah, because this topic had been talked about a lot, right? Because this was the whole thing. Is like, yeah, but I loved and I laughed so hard when they finally showed the back of a car, because they didn't do it forever. But I always peep license plates whenever I can to try to get an idea of where they're at. And of course, license plates of Seymour's car have no state listed. They're completely fake license plates. And I was like, all right, guys, you got me. That's what I got.
Yeah.
That's all I got. So 100%, any place USA, like you see characters that would make sense in West Coast, East Coast, Middle America or the South. It's all kind of there.
Yeah, it felt simultaneously California and Ohio at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. California, Ohio. We split the difference and we end up somewhere in the Midwest. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Salt Lake City, honestly. It just, but regardless, either which way. So with that said, you have Rebecca, who's also nonconformist in high school. But for maybe different reasons, it's hard to say. Like when you're nonconformist, the issue is going to be you're not going to have the same reason as the next person over there next to you. That's the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But we see Rebecca wanting to move out on her own. She has goals, she has dreams, and of course, the easiest or like maybe the only realistic way to follow through with these dreams in the society that we've been given, even back then, was to conform to the work schedule, to conform some way into the world. And we see Rebecca conforming in the way she knows. Now, she works at what it has to be a Starbucks stand-in. I'm not going to, pretend it's anything else as far as it goes. Green apron means Starbucks to me.
Yeah.
And we get to watch her working and then kind of like learning that like maybe I don't like weirdos that much because weirdos suck when you're working.
Yeah. She's confronting, she's in a more mature way, she's confronting the world outside of her self-created bubble, and she's actually putting herself out in the workforce and exposing herself to different types of people. And maybe even if it's not new types of people, she's at least like conforming in the way that she's aware that she, is, like 17 or 18, and she's not going to be a kid anymore. She has to like change up her public appearance, and we see that through her wardrobe changes and the maturity of like what she wears and her clothes, and she becomes more corporate or whatever. Um, and you see the opposite of that with Enid's character, and kind of just doubling down on this like in between kid and adult phase.
Yeah, and it's so with Rebecca, it's funny to me because it's like with the way she's presented, I feel like she's presented as maybe making the more logical choice in all of this. She's not presented with the same sort of level of issues that
Mm-hmm.
Enid's presented with. And of course, Enid's the main character. We're seeing this through the lens of what Enid is seeing, right? But I do wish that maybe we got to see a little bit more of Rebecca's challenge in certain ways, because going from point A to point B, where she's just working all the time now and dealing with all these weirdos, would be an interesting version of like, hey, these are people who I used to revere and now I dislike them. I'd like to see that a little bit more, maybe.
Yeah, I can see that. Like just in her, yeah, her character like isn't really given much at all, and in at least in comparison to the other two main leads, who we get to see more development and changes with their behaviors. She's just kind of Enid's best friend that she's slowly growing apart from.
She's just like a mirror up to Enid, showing the differences, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, that's like a mirror. That's a good way to put it.
Um, Before we get to Seymour, I'm going to talk about Josh because Josh is listed as one of the mains in this, and I have a hard time talking about him as one of the mains in this. Josh is also one of the high school friends of Enid and Rebecca, and so Josh is the convenience store clerk who, at some point, someone had a crush on.
Yeah, I think it's kind of vague if they actively have a crush on him or what.
He feels like the middle ground where like he was conformist. He already had a job,
Mm-hmm.
but he's also not really that willing to mature.
Yeah,
He found a
I feel
job
like,
with zero element of let's get it together, and he's like, "This is where I'm sitting."
yeah, he's a funny character because I get the sense that he's maybe like a year older than them, and he's kind of like, or maybe he did graduate with them. I don't recall exactly, but I do get a sense that maybe he's had more like real world working experience or like life outside of high school experience, where he's not really a mirror to their characters, but he is just kind of a fun buddy that like depicts another part of the world that they're living in after high school.
He also gives them some abilities to take some shots and see how the difference between the mature levels are. Like when you were watching them writing on the flyer on his door.
It's one of my favorite scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, and you get to see Rebecca going like, I don't write that, don't leave that, because now she's worried about what people think. And Enid's like, I don't care what people think at all.
Exactly. And that scene, I think, is shortly after the scene where they call Seymour to the diner, I believe, where both Enid's the instigator of playing that prank on him, but like we see Becca's character immediately like fall into alliance with Enid as part of his scheme. But then like later on, when she's writing the note on Josh's door, Becca's the one that's kind of like trying to be more logical or bring her back to being like, this is like immature. Like it's a good development.
Mm-hmm. That's like where we see the schism, because I think after that too, you have the scene after they go to the Saturday record store, and Enid is talking about the bags and the handmade bags, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I had handmade bags. That's so nice. That's so awesome." And then Rebecca goes, "Yeah, he should just kill himself." Like on completely different
Yeah.
levels. They're not even talking about the same thing anymore.
Yeah. I love that. That was such a jarring like moment. That was one of my favorites.
That was 100% when you're like, "Oh, okay." They've
Yeah.
changed mentally because these two are in completely different places. Also, it was very clear that Enid was into Seymour at that point.
She was, yeah, there's an immediate like fixation on his character.
But okay, let's talk about Seymour. So Seymour, played by Steve Buscemi, he is a major part of this movie. I want to get the elephant out of the room and just ask you this question:
Mm-hmm.
age difference. Did it skeeve you out a lot?
So here's the thing. So I've seen some obviously more modern discourse on this movie and people just being very turned off because of the age gap and Seymour, man in his mid 40s sleeping with a teenage girl is inherently creepy, and I think he is a creep. He's a very like weird guy, and not just in terms of his interests. I think his interests are cool, but like he's deeply insecure. He's just really like out of touch with reality. A lot of that is like self chosen. Like he doesn't really want to. He's very similar to Enid. He's nonconformist in a different way. But I love his character in terms of how great it is in depicting like this just morally gray kind of guy, because he's not inherently a bad guy. He's not inherently a good guy. And the age gap is relationship is creepy, but also like I think if this movie was trying to go for the message of this older man taking advantage of his younger woman, and the older man was clearly just like this douchebag, like predator guy, sure, like it might come across as like, okay, this is clearly making a statement about age gap relationships being inappropriate, but like it wouldn't work as well. It's just making his character likable, as skeevy as he is, just works for the movie, and it makes it way more interesting. So it does skeeve me out, but it feels realistic, and it's just interesting.
Here's where my line was with it, right? Okay, so in the beginning, I was like, "Oh, this is awful. You need to cut these people off immediately." But kind of the earnestness of it throughout the middle part of the movie kind of changed my mind a little bit, because I was like, okay, so it starts off as super creepy, and I think even he knew it was super creepy, and he's just like, I don't know why she keeps coming over here and talking to me, and then they do become friends of sorts, and he's still not really making moves at all, like
No.
he's not a move maker, and you could argue that maybe like that was his intention, but I didn't necessarily get that out of it at any point. He always seemed like he was like arm's distance with her, like
it, it's interesting too. There's a scene I picked up on a second watch where they're in bed together, and he mentioned something. He's like, "Oh, I don't remember if he's referring to like he always thought that Enid was into him, or he's like always like, oh, I've always like thought." There was like an implied like from the get go where he was like interested in her, intimately. But at the same time, I do completely agree that he's not keeping her around because he wants to sleep with her. That happens, and it's creepy and weird of him. But I think their friendship is very genuine, even though like looking at it in a vacuum, I think it's very genuine. I think that like he has questionable choices for like hanging out around this 18-year-old girl, but he's not keeping her around because he wants to sleep with her. He's just keeping her around because there is a genuine like shared similarity between them.
Yeah. Well, and also he's portrayed, I think, as a little bit of a coward in his ability to stand up. Like, so whenever she
Exactly.
shows up, it's not necessarily that he wants her there or doesn't want her there. It's just that he's not going to say no to her showing up because she's the one who initiated it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's kind of, he just waits for initiations, which I don't know. I'm not well versed enough on if that's creepy, but if that is, then there you go. Uh, but yeah, so it's so interesting to me because like my knee jerk reaction is like this is always the absolute worst, and then throughout the whole entire movie, it's just like I don't see anything where it's like the pushiness of it,
He's definitely not pushy.
and
Yeah.
you could argue that like maybe there's like some like grooming going on or something here because she's clearly picking up on all the things that he likes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also so strange because Enid's character is presented as this person that would do that regardless.
Exactly. And like he doesn't seem to have the social skills, and like this isn't an excuse for grooming behavior or anything adjacent to that, but he doesn't seem to have the social skills wherein he would be like opportunistic in terms of like their relationship progressing. I think I agree that he is just kind of a coward, and I think if there wasn't a scene where they've been drinking at his apartment and she like leaned in, I don't think there would ever be a point in their relationship where he would make a move on her without her. Like that would, even if it entered into his mind, I don't think there was really anything in the film that suggested that like anything about his relationship with Enid was opportunistic for him to sleep with her. I think he just he was into it, sure, but he was never going to pursue it, and he wasn't like there was, I don't know how to coin it exactly, but like uh socially unaware grooming going on.
Yeah,
Perhaps.
yeah, exactly. It's an interesting idea because I think like what we've been presented after all these years, because 2001 again, like there's this like level of complex, and then 2026 it doesn't feel like there's a level of complex to this. It's like good or bad.
Exactly,
And I
which
don't
is
necessarily disagree with that in whole totality, but then you present it with something like this where you see it and you're like, it's it feels like it's definitely like Enid almost feels like she was manipulating um Seymour the whole time, you know, where like, what in the world, how do you take that, where it's like now you're watching her making fake calls and setting up this relationship under false pretenses.
If you take the sexual element out of it all, like if Seymour had been, gay, even if him as the older man in his mid 40s and her being the 18-year-old, she would have the power and the autonomy in the relationship. She would be taking advantage of him. There was no sexual element, regardless of the age gap. Like she would be the one that's not grooming him, obviously, but like the power imbalance is in her favor. It's just that the sexual element changes that because he's an older man. Inherently, it changes that, but it's not like. I guess all that to say is that like I don't. In a vacuum, their friendship is very genuine. I think in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I agree with that. With like without the sexual element, 100%. Like they were just friends, and just like she always had like a kind of maybe like a darker undertone to it, and maybe Seymour also did. We weren't presented with that directly. The relationship with Dana, I think, is really what you have to look for the litmus, because it didn't really seem like Seymour was going to break up with Dana.
Yeah.
Then
But
the night happened with the champagne, and he immediately went, okay, well, I got to go break up with her now.
yeah, which is honestly, I mean, I don't. It's like doing the bare minimum, really. Like, oh, I guess I slept with an 18-year-old. I guess I better go break up with my girlfriend. Like that's the definition of the bare minimum. But at least it makes his character more on the good side of things. Like, at least he like had some, and he even says he's like, I'm going to do something, but I've stayed in relationships way too long because I've been such a coward, but I'm going to do this now. And even though it is the bare minimum, it does show that his character, at least, I think, in my opinion, like leans into the idea that he's a creepy guy, but he's not a predator.
Mm-hmm.
I think it shows that there's a genuine care about Dana. My question I do want to ask you though, and I don't think this is really conveyed in the film at all, but is there any element to his relationship with Dana that suggests that he's in the relationship with Dana to make maybe Enid jealous, or like why is he in the relationship with his woman who's clearly just very different than him? Is maybe he just attracted to the fact that she's so different, but at the same time he's not pursuing other relationships with women?
I hear my read on this with Seymour is kind of like negative towards Seymour in general, and it's the fact that he had a woman that showed interest in him, mm-hmm. and he was going to be willing to put up with all the differences regardless. Where
it's
he
like
yeah, like where like he may not have put up with it in any other aspect of his life. For this, he's like, wow, she's a woman who wants to be my romantic partner. I'm in. Carry me to the end. I don't care. Like even in that scene where he goes to break up with her and she's getting very she's not getting handsy, but her coworker is getting handsy with her.
Mm-hmm.
Is in a way that's clearly over the line, like holding onto her hips and stuff and hugging like tightly, like, and he doesn't even seem like it registers with him. Like it just doesn't matter. He'll just walk through it all because he's too cowardly to confront otherwise.
Yeah.
Changing up his whole style with the blue jeans is so funny. But yeah, I don't necessarily get that. I think I could see an argument being made towards it, but like from first watch at the very least, I didn't get that. I got that he had someone who showed some interest, and then once that first date happens, he's along for the ride regardless of what happens.
I agree. I think that's a good way to put it. I think just along for the ride. And it's the same reason why he puts up with, Enid constantly popping into his life, because he's too cowardly to set boundaries, or, he's desperate. So he's taking the bare minimum. And not to say that like his relationship with Dana is anything like the bare minimum, but like even if she was less compatible with him or less attractive, I think he still would put up with it because of that level of desperation. And I did want to point out too, something we talked about, like a lot of media literacy today is kind of composed of like everything is good or everything's bad. And that's something that really bothers me. Obviously, like there's nuance to that, and, censorship and letting go of ideas of the past and things depicted in the past is good and makes sense, and because it's progressive and it's better for humanity, whatever, going on a tangent here. But one thing that does bother me is just that when you look at media literacy that depicts fictional characters and like wanting to label things as good or bad, I don't like that in my media. I love characters that are in the morally gray. Like I like movies of characters where the leads are unlikable. Like that's like some of my favorite types of movies. But one thing that I saw criticism of online is that the movie made Seymour into this like likable, redeemed character at the end. And in a way, we do see like some progress and growth from him, I think. But I don't think the movie lets him off easy the way some people have said, because the very last scene of him, he's in his therapist's office, and his therapist seems clearly just annoyed of him and like ready to be done with the session. And then like the scene ends of his like mom barging in and talking about dinner. Like to me, like he just seems so pathetic. I feel like the movie isn't trying to like make him into this kind of anti-hero. I think the last scene of him is him just looking really, really pathetic. Like, good for him. Like he's making changes in his life. Like we can pat him on the back for that, but he doesn't seem like this like redeemed character. He's just the movie's just like there's never scene of his loser and his weird mom and his therapist annoyed of him.
Well, 100%. I didn't get like any sort of like awesome ending for him at all. Like it seems so negative. It's like, okay, this guy, he had some luck getting to where he was. He's a man child who was never emotionally matured, and here we are seeing it. And once again, he's just along for the ride, which is not a place to be in therapy. That's why the therapist is annoyed, because she's like, you're not making changes. You just keep telling me the same thing over and over again. I tell you the same thing over and over again, and then we don't do anything about it.
He literally says, he's like, I think I'm ready to just go back to my old life. Like, no, it's not the point of this.
Right. Like he's not willing to change, because like underneath all of this for him is like this deep laziness, in my opinion. Right. It's like he's found some things that work, and he just wants to sit there. And that includes stuff like the way he collects the 78s and the ragtime in particular. And like, he is just keeping everyone at a distance. Everyone stays at an arm's length, so that way they can't interrupt this easy thing that he's found.
Exactly.
And like, that's not like, that sounds awesome in ways, right? Like I want to find an easy way of life where it's like, okay, this is just simple and easy, and then all the cool stuff I want is on the side. That's awesome. Right. But I don't think it's portrayed very positively here, and he keeps getting taken advantage of because of his want to stay the same.
And his cowardice to like make changes in his life. And I think there's another side of his character where he could have the same interests and same beliefs, but it comes from a place of confidence. Like, this is my passion. This is like, I'm different and I'm nonconformist, but like I'm confident in myself and I'm in this situation because it's who I want to be. But like you even hear him talk about like his interests and stuff, and he's like who would want to be like who? I hate my interests. I think he even says that at one point. Like he doesn't have that confidence.
Just like, if I was like that, I would kill myself. It's like, oh yeah, you should kill me. Like he's 100% on board for it, and that's. I love those scenes because some of that, strikes home a little bit too close. Like Terry did a good job about making someone who's relatable to people who are like into old media and stuff, like in this way, because you're like, oh man, but he made him so pathetic at the end.
His character, I just rewatched the documentary Crumb again today, and his character is very reminiscent of Robert Crumb. If Robert Crumb had never like had his big break of like depicting his emotional like his insecurities through his art, like he is able to convey like a lot of his insecurity and just fucking weirdness through his artwork, and that's an outlet for him. And he's also in the film, you see the rest of his family who don't have that opportunity, and the Seymour character is akin to like a more like reserved version of Robert Crumb. There's a lot of like the obsession of old blues records, and there's the hating the capitalist society, and all of these just kind of like on mainstream ideals. The Seymour character is very, I think, heavily influenced by Crumb.
And that makes sense. I know that Terry at some point, and I might be repeating myself here, mentioned that the Seymour character was also based on him a little bit.
Which makes sense too. Yeah.
So there's a little bit of self-loathing in there where you can feel it.
Yeah.
And again, like I'm on here. If you follow Additional Crew on Instagram, we're always talking about physical media and doing things like this, right? And a lot of what we're trying to do is push it into the more mainstream communities. Maybe that's not the right word, but just out and finding community somewhere. Because I think the hard part about this is it is very isolating if you're not attempting to make it something different.
Yeah, I can see that.
And gosh, record collecting in 2001 was just busted. Like that's hard. But with that said, like he was complex, and I did enjoy that because like you can't really land on just one or the other with him. It's not like it's full on pathetic because it's close, but he does have a handle on his life.
He does, yeah, and a lot of his, feelings about the world. We'll talk about a scene where they're in the car together later, but he does say a lot of the inside thoughts out loud. Again, it's like just with Enid. It's not like out in the open, but like he's very like curmudgeon-y in like a Larry David kind of way, where it's like I kind of see what you're saying. Like I can relate to this, like your view of the world. Like I'm, less cynical than you, but also like I kind of get where you're coming from.
Yeah, and I guess if you were to look at this as like him being a creep, and then also see that, I could see how you'd be angry. Um, it's hard for me because I think that we saw so many layers of this.
Yeah,
It's
and that's what I like about his character. Like again, if you made his character much more obviously like dislikable, then it's just kind of lazy. Like you actually get some nuance in this person.
And I want to talk about the art class because the art class presents a lot of ideas, right? And I think they play into kind of the same thing where you're watching like two different ideas headbutt and neither necessarily come out on top.
Mm-hmm.
Because the art class talks a lot about this difference between just messing around and having fun with art, and then also making statements and saying things that are important.
Mm-hmm.
And we see it through kind of a cynical lens, I want to say, like because Enid, her art is probably more technically proficient as far as like talent goes
Mm-hmm.
than what we're being presented with, but the other one is I'm going to sound negative here about it too, able to bullshit a point that makes it sound cool. It's like you can be more relevant to the moment
Uh-huh.
versus relevant to the actual profession.
There's a degree of laziness with her in her character. As talented as she is, like she's just gonna like present this like racist caricature to her class when she could, like fill up her notebook with these amazing drawings, but she's just gonna like bring this into class and try and sound like she's woke or whatever.
Well, and it's so funny because she like tries to conform to what they're saying, and she does it in like the most just off-putting way possible. And I don't even know that she meant to do it necessarily. Like that was like the number one intention behind bringing it, or if it was like, okay, well, this guy thinks it's cool, and I think he knows art, so I'm going to show off this. But also, it turns out that's the thing that's going to like ostracize me the most from all of this, and I'm going to get failed and get my, But the fact that then the teacher's also like, this is amazing, right? Speaks to like the vapidness of just conforming, right? So it's like you get to see the negative of not conforming, and then also the negative of conforming, because the conforming has no real underlying depth to it besides how you explain it. It's not the
Mhm.
thing itself, it's just the explanation of the thing that's getting you the props.
Exactly, and I think that was kind of the complete opposite of what Enid intended. But like, I think I agree. It's a combination of like I said, like kind of just her laziness or indifference to the class. Also, like the shock value that would bring the nonconformist nature of what bringing it in the class would mean, and also like something that Seymour thinks is cool. So she's like adopting his style. So I think it's a combination of all of those things. And it is funny. I don't her reaction, like she doesn't even show up to the art show where it's depicted. So like there's clearly an indifference there. Um, and I like, or I should say, like the art teacher character Roberta. She in a movie full of like just really insufferable, annoying people. She's by far the most annoying to me, and I love that she's kind of like this wacky, goofy art teacher, but like she also clearly does not have, at least from an audience perspective, it's not having any like clear, like we don't really know what she's gonna like or dislike. She seems very stupid.
Yeah, she's very much like fly by night sort of person, right? Like whatever in that moment is catching her is what she now thinks is the best.
Yeah.
And so I think like she represents just like the general pop culture community in that way. Like whatever has captured this moment is now the best part of what this moment is, and it's ignoring the context all around her, right? Because of course, if you throw that picture up in a room with people of mixed races and colors, the people who it's depicting negatively are going to be pretty upset, with good reason. You know, like you're gonna throw this picture up on the wall and call it art, and I'm here to watch this stuff. Like you're immediately just, well, I don't have to explain racism again here, I don't think, but then to see her like do this quasi, I stand up for this person, but also I'm going to test the feeling in the room and make her stand up for herself instead of like why I chose this as the thing that would get the number, like the full scholarship.
Yeah,
It shows that like she doesn't really have that backbone behind it. You know, she's like, well, I have to be ready to change based on what the public says.
which is in a weird way parallels Enid's kind of like fixation on whatever is cool or interesting to her in the moment. It doesn't have a lot of concreteness behind it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I also I wish that Enid had been there because I would have loved to see Enid try to actually stand up for something that she did in a way that shows that it was relevant instead of irrelevant to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because that would have been the opposite. She would have had to completely abandon her goal, like her everything she believed in that one moment, just to like stand up to not get like destroyed.
Yeah.
And that would have been interesting because that's the one thing Enid won't do is she won't stand up to say why this is relevant. Really,
She'll just fly on to the next thing in a way. Yeah.
But also like her not being there again. I think you're right. This is important to her character because it shows that she has no real understanding of or motivation to even engage with these parts of the system that she's involved in. Like the only thing that is connecting her to job or money is Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else is pushing towards that. And when that's on the line, she doesn't care.
Yeah, she just like lets it go, and definitely a sadness to her character in that way, like where she's so happy to be done with high school and out of this. He keeps saying conformist, but like just conformist education system, and now it's on to the next one. But she's so, in a way, similar to Seymour as well, like just so happy to just kind of be complacent and not have anything change because change is scary and it involves having convictions and having a personal development, not just emotionally, but like in terms of like how you present yourself to the world. When it's just so much easier to just like be just adopting whatever around you is alienating people because that's catchy. It stands out. Like it feeds your ego in a weird way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I will say this, the answer that she gives to Rebecca during one of the conversations, and I know I'm kind of jumping all over, but it's all the same purpose, I think, here. She mentions the like, what do you mean you don't like the weirdos? They're us. We are the weirdos, right? It's such a cop-out answer from her because the weirdos are all differently weird in their own ways, and they earned that weird. They made those choices, like Norman didn't because he can't remember anything, but the dude in the wheelchair who like had the Microsoft Word up on his laptop, he earned that. He did that. Yeah. You don't accidentally start doing that. You made a choice. And it's like she's just unwilling to make that choice ultimately.
Exactly, because she doesn't know who he is.
And that's a fair place to be as an 18-year-old. I think it's hard to like consider that as also your reason for being superior in ways, which I think is maybe what is the most. I don't think it's ever said directly, but it feels that way because of the way she's toying with people.
Yeah, there's the immaturity to it, and I think that also adds to kind of the authenticity of her character because like, it's not just like she's this way to be contrarian. She's contrarian in this way because she's 18 years old.
Man, can you imagine if you would put that up on display now, though? Like that would be like your career's already over before you even start. I think in 2001, you might be able to get away with like getting out of a local newspaper's range, but
yeah,
just the one time when she finally does decide that she's ready to conform and she goes to hand in the scholarship and then she gets told like, oh, I'm so sorry, but I had to rescind it because you didn't pass.
Yeah.
That is a sad moment because it's like she had the whole world handed to her right there. If only she could have stood up for herself for a second.
Yeah.
And that is to say, I know that I'm not giving a lot of good answers on what this movie ultimately is about because I don't think that there is an ultimate about the ending we see is pretty loose.
Very loose.
Yeah, we don't get an ultimate like here is what we're talking about. Here's the exact thing because I think all these themes are just kind of thrown out there. We're left to percolate on some of the ideas with it, and then it says, okay, and that's the end of this slice of life.
And I think it worked because like, Enid's character, even though she does have some personal development at the very end of the movie, she still hasn't figured herself out. So like the fact that the movie ends with her just like getting on a bus and going on to the next adventure or whatever, it feels earned because like that's where her character's emotional state is in the moment. Is just like this. There's conflict. I need to like change myself. I need to like put an effort, and like I don't know. I'm just gonna get on a bus and leave. Like that's how her character emotionally is feeling, and how her I feel like her knee jerk reaction to challenges and like being called out would be just to like leave.
Yeah, yeah. And also like the idea that she's sitting at the same bus stop that Norman was, the one that's been discontinued, but eventually does randomly show up, right? And is just waiting for the thing to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of like moves her from point A to point B. It's kind of poignant. And this is just like a spitball of an idea that's happening right now. Like that whole entire Norman moves on. I think Norman died personally. I think that's what that signifies is Norman died. He got on the bus. He died. Right. Whereas
Yeah.
she gets on the bench, and the idea is that she's just going to remain in her lane until something happens that changes her life significantly.
Exactly. And that's the thing that I think that it's the bus, symbolizes change. And I think I agree. I think for Norman that would be death, but like for her, it's like a different kind of change, but it's also true to her character because she's not doing anything concrete or tangible to change. She just is allowing something to come into her life and literally like drive her away to the next moment. There's still the consistency of her character where she's not changing. She's just allowing life to hit her and take her away. Is what we see throughout the whole movie.
Agreed. And then like, at that point with the ending. So Seymour has the kind of, he's moved back in with his mom. Things have really reverted for him. What I did, however, and I don't know how much it meant, like love the conviction of Seymour trying to throw down the convenience store shelf to like finally show how much he cares about something.
It's funny too. That also adds nuance to his character because it calls back to the scene in the car where he's like driving away from the blind date and the guy cuts him off and he gets this like explosive moment of rage, and then it's just like it's gone, just like in the convenience store. Like there's something clearly like mentally this guy has a lot of repressed emotions and feelings that are building up, but he also like is such a coward in a way that he doesn't confront them. They just come out, and then it's like, okay, I'm over, like back in my shell kind of thing.
Sorry, I'm going back to that whole entire moment with his mom out there, which is like, Seymour, what do you want to eat? I can't imagine someone's like, they let Seymour off easily, man. Like he literally is just showing that he doesn't have the emotional maturity of like a kid.
Yeah, the commentary I saw online again was just it's kind of a newer form of media literacy interpretation where just like, well, character does bad thing, that means character is bad, and if movie doesn't say that he's bad, the movie is not morally good, kind of thing. That's kind of the interpretation I got.
See, that my understanding of this issue has always been that like if the director isn't very explicitly showing his support for the badness of that character, I saying this in a weird way, but like isn't like very explicitly saying this is a bad thing that this person has done, then the director's probably a bad dude.
That's the discourse. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, on one hand I do get it, but like, well, can the director just tweet about it later? Can we get a movie with the nuance in it first, and then have the director go like, by the way, that wasn't cool?
Yeah. Like I hate movies. Not all movies, but I generally don't like movies that have a lot of exposition. So movies that like, especially when it comes to moral things, it's like if there's too much exposition, it just comes across as inauthentic to me. And especially in a slice of life kind of movie like this, if it explained things as being bad, it would not feel authentic. It would take me out of the movie.
This also presented just such a different look at this like mixed age relationship, like where both the people involved weren't successful. There wasn't this like aspect of success that was going into it. There wasn't like this really aspect of predation going into it. It was just the mixing of two people that didn't know how to operate within society.
Yeah.
It's very just interesting for that reason. Because yeah, every time I've seen this, it's always been one or the other. Like this is really bad, or someone's really successful, so they can go do this, you know. And this one was just, yeah, these people just don't know how to talk, so they just ended up here together.
Yeah, and that's why. Yeah, I think that they're, again, like in a vacuum, their friendship does feel very genuine because like they are they are pretty similar in a lot of ways, and it's more pathetic because Seymour is a grown man, so there's the difference there. But in essence, they are quite similar.
It would be an interesting to have a follow up to Ghost World with Ghost World 2, where we get to see Enid's character as an older woman, and
Yeah,
like she meets someone younger who also does the same thing, and see like kind of where that goes. Like I know that seems like maybe a cop out sequel, but this is a sequel that I think could have some legs, and like also come back to like the real world that we have now. It's been long enough, 25-year anniversary, probably right
yeah,
around when we released this episode too. So
about the same about the same age as Seymour now.
I
25
I
years.
think Thora Birch hasn't been in a ton lately, so
Yeah, she really hasn't. Unfortunately, she's. I mean, talked about. She's great in this movie. She was really good in American Beauty too. Um, she just she adds a lot to this character that could have been a cliche.
I was reading that like before her there was connections to Jennifer Love Hewitt and Christina Ricci, and I just feel like they would have just been different versions of this character almost completely. Like I can't see Jennifer Love Hewitt pulling it off, not because of Jennifer Love
Would,
Hewitt's like skills, but just Jennifer Love Hewitt has a completely different energy to her.
would she have been the Scarlett Johansson character?
No, she would have been Enid.
See, that doesn't make any sense. Honestly, even as the Scarlett Johansson character, I feel like Johansson has been really good in a lot of things, but she also does a good job of portraying kind of flat characters, like not flat in terms of personality, but just like kind of just like existing in the moment type characters. And I think Love Hewitt would not play either of them very well.
Yeah. I when I read it, I'm like, okay, well, it's good that it went with Thora Birch because I could imagine Christina Ricci being too quirky.
That's a good point, because even as sharp as the script is, there's a definite opportunity for like a performance to be very quirky and like just come across as too like, I don't know. Thora Birch just does a really good job.
Yeah, yeah. Because one thing that let's might as well just segue into acting at this point, right? So one thing that I really like about the way Thora Birch plays the character is that her movements and kind of like the way she talks is so stiff. It is like cardboard stiff. There's really like you can sense that lack of like dominant personality underneath her.
Yeah,
through her movements and through her intonation. At times because of that, when it's her and Scarlett Johansson talking to each other, it kind of got a little bit Gilmore Girls-y for me because they're just delivering lines without a lot of intonation happening between the two of them. And it made sense. And also with the time of the movie, that's fine. Like, honestly, there's just a style that's kind of like lost in time at this point. But I really liked her physical acting because it really did show that like underneath this, there's really like this void that just needs to be fixed, or not fixed. Fixed is the wrong word. I'm sorry to everyone who heard that. Filled in some way.
Filled. Yeah, I think that, I mean, there's a couple great scenes with that. Would be like anytime she's in art class, she's just kind of there as a body. She's not like expressing herself. I think the scene right after they graduate and they're sitting on the bench, she's just kind of sitting there like still and stiffly. And like, I think the movie's very self-aware of this because on the art of the cover is that them just against the backdrop of his white void, and they're just standing there with their arms at their sides. Like there's no personality being conveyed there.
And that makes sense. I mean, that's the hard thing with nonconformity. When you leave the system that is conformist, you ain't got nothing. There's nothing underneath it then. Now it's just like free floating,
Yeah.
So I like at first going into the first like 20 minutes, I was really annoyed by how stiff it was. And then by the end, I'm like, oh, it makes all the sense in the world. We're there and I get it now. I totally follow. So kudos there. I agree with you with what you said about Scarlett Johansson is that there wasn't like a ton of depth around any of it, but also that really, really, really wasn't the purpose of her character.
No, yeah. You needed someone to be just kind of one note, and in a way that's not like she's just playing a stereotype, because she's not playing a stereotype. She just is playing like a teenager that doesn't have a personality in a lot of ways.
the stuff she said, man. I worked at Starbucks around that same time. It's true, man. You really do start to like get real annoyed by the weirdos because they're mean. And one of the things that I liked is that like the lady with the blonde hair in the middle who was just so rude to her is such a realistic little slice, and uh who was like, no, and I do not want your biscotti, and it's just like, wow, okay, ouch, I have to
Yeah.
ask these things, right? Anyway, you can, it disillusions you, it does, and she plays that getting disillusioned and like clinging onto this goal and having that specific goal in mind because she's now becoming disillusioned with like this idea of not coming into her own and still dealing with all this stuff.
Yeah, it's like you can't escape it. But she does have a more maturity in that way because she's goal oriented. Wherein like when Enid gets the opportunity to like be in the same situation as her, she's just like being a goofy kid basically and just like riffing of customers, and it's very funny, very immature. But like she's clearly not fixated on like the connection between working job with these people and getting end goal. It's just like I don't want to be here. I hate this. I'm just gonna be a goofball.
Mm-hmm, one, and again, like that seemed really silly when it was happening. However, that's also very real. I'm sure that anyone who's worked retail has worked with these people who just can't seem to like keep it together for that minute. They have to
Mm-hmm.
talk about how bad it is, or they have to talk about, like just make a total joke out of everything. And
Yeah,
it's just really good on that part. Steve Buscemi in Seymour, he did great, but also it's hard to call it a great acting part because I think it really was just like be detached, be
yeah.
pathetic, and absolutely no matter what, never assume that you have control of a situation. Always give up and relinquish that control to everyone around you.
And I think similarly, I think that what does make his performance really, really good for me, though, is that he conveys a lot physically and with his eyes. Where like there's several scenes where he is like, it seems like you can tell what he's feeling emotionally and how he wants to react, but the other character isn't giving him that opening. And I don't mean in the relationship with Enid, even like just like everyone around him, basically. Like there's a tell in his eyes, but then he'll change his posture or like, and not in a way that's like over the top. It's very subtle ways he like shifts or like looks away that like you can tell what he's feeling, but he's just not even close to like opening up because he has that cowardice.
I'm trying to think of any like one moment where he has like the explosion moments. The moment in the convenience store when he does try to tip over the shelf is so funny, and it is acted well because like even when now you see him as like, I'm determined to get what I need out of this and to go show her old crush that it's really me that should be after, and he just can't do it because he can't commit 100% to the bit,
Yeah,
even though he's trying his best to. He still can't.
yeah.
Like
Like
that pullback at the end where you're watching him like, but I'm not going to go all the way.
yeah.
Oh, I give up. You
He,
know.
he wants to make himself appear bigger than he feels in those moments. Yeah.
Yeah, see again, I just don't see how you see this guy and you say this, he got off easy, man. He's like
So,
just listed as this like real, he's a passenger to life, you know?
mhm. Passenger again, the bus.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Um, Other than that, I mean, the one thing I can say about this film is that there was no performances that stood out as just particularly bad to me. They all I think hit a certain level. Now I don't know how much was asked of everybody because I don't think that there's like a lot of emotional depth around a lot of people. Um,
yeah,
like I don't even think they gave a name to Enid's dad.
yeah. I just Bob Babylon. All I can think of
Yeah,
it
exactly.
stands out so much to me. But I think that it makes sense because again, we are seeing this all through Enid's eyes, and she doesn't have a lot of insight into the world,
Mhm.
to a lot of the one-note characters. But I do really appreciate that even characters that don't have a lot of depth or anything like that, maybe there's might be some exceptions, but there's no distracting cliches of characters. Like maybe the peppy like theater girl that comes into the diner, like maybe she's a little bit of a cliche, but like it's not. It doesn't feel like a quirky indie movie type cliche, if that makes sense.
Sloppy roommate that farts in the one scene.
I liked his character though.
Same. I know. I said it, and I'm like, I don't really want to hate on this guy. So
Yeah.
he also makes sense as the roommate for this guy because they're never going to challenge each other.
That's a good point. Yeah.
You know, you got like this dude who's like on the other side of it, and maybe he's a little bit more assertive, but he's also never going to like tell you, "Oh, you gotta get better, man."
Yeah, he's not he's not one to talk.
Yeah, exactly. They both accepted their station in life. Yeah, I know that's not a lot to say about the acting. I think it was good. It was good acting. Like, I don't have a lot to tear apart here.
I think Thora Birch stood out as the best. Though. I mean, obviously she's the main character, but I really think that she took this character from being this, you know, kind of quirky indie teenage girl into like this, you know, obviously not very well developed as a character, but purposely not well developed as a character, and just made her like just seem more real and engaging.
Yeah, I agree. She kept her movement so stiff throughout this movie that it almost looked like something like was hurting on her at all times. And I just kept remembering, like, seeing that. I'm just like, it's just this, like, there's no fluidity to what's happening here. It is all calculated. It is all very slow and very thought out, as opposed to just organically happening. And like the fact that you can kind of see that through the body language speaks to, I think, some pretty nifty acting.
Yeah, an intention behind it.
All right, so let's move on to the last little bit here then. Your 3 favorite scenes of the film. I'm going to start off here just because it was actually really hard for me to think of 3 favorite scenes to this film. Oddly enough, I don't think that there's like a lot of peaks and valleys. It is just kind of like on a level. Yeah. But here's what I'll say. So the number one peak for me is watching Seymour attempt to pull down the shelf. I've talked about the scene a couple times, so I don't need to get back into it. But you get Doug in his nunchucks, and maybe that just speaks to my level of humor. That the one guy who Mike Judge told him that they had to cast, choking out someone else with nunchucks and being so goofy about it, was hilarious. The fact that he ended up in the hospital.
Yeah.
Like, dude, Seymour is so pathetic, dude. He got choked out by nunchucks for like 2 seconds, so he went to the hospital.
Yeah. In media. And it's fun. I love that scene too. I love the Doug character. I guess I said that there's really not any characters that are stereotypes, and you could make the argument that Doug is a stereotype, but like, what is he a stereotype of? He's just a very weird character, and yeah, adds a lot, I think.
He's just a weird character that shows up. I love that scene. Like, we just get to see Seymour trying to act like finally this thing, and like the film doesn't let him off easy in this. It says you aren't this thing, and you won't be this thing. And as soon as you come close to somebody who is kind of this thing, you just get your butt handed to you and end up in the hospital.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta don't even pretend.
Yeah.
The record collector's party is my second favorite scene. Part of that is also, again, because I love David Cross. He's the best. And watching him come in and play like an asshole jerk in a funny way is always hilarious to me, because he's so not cool, and I think he knows he's so not cool. Then when he sits down, he's like, "I'm gonna hit on her. I can get her." And he's just so bad at it.
You can tell he's insecure, but like his insecurity masquerade as, you know, faux confidence in the scene, and it's pathetic in a very different way, and it's a good contrast.
It is. Oh, and then, you know, you get to hear a lot more about Seymour like talking with the people around him that he would be considered colleagues with at that time, and you know, even they're talking, you know, he's not being very confrontational. But I think this is also the scene where he asked to be killed by Enid, if I remember right. This is the one where he's like, "If I like this stuff, I would ask to be killed."
Yeah,
he's like, "Yeah, just kill me."
Yeah.
You know, that's relatable when you realize you're in real deep on something that's not connecting you to other people, is instead isolating you, you know?
Yeah. And if it is connecting you with other people, it's connecting you with other people like David Cross's character, which also doesn't make you feel good.
Exactly. Or the other guy who's like, "I will only accept the best of the best. I don't accept anything with any of this other stuff." And, you know, you're not on that level. which is again relatable. It's unfortunate that it's relatable, probably in a lot of ways. My third favorite scene is the mirror, father mirror, just the way it happened and then the way it was portrayed afterwards. Like, look at that! Isn't that wonderful? I took film courses, and it was just like that. Every time you showed something that you revered, it didn't matter what it was or anything that happened. It was the best thing, and it showed the emotions perfectly. And then if it wasn't, then it wasn't very good.
You just give up. It's like
Yeah,
black and white. Yeah.
exactly. And then, but it did also portray film, like a film competition level of like, let's explore trauma and what it means, and hear the things that look, oh my gosh, artsy and ugly and mean, and here we are, mirror father mirror, basically giving exposition while at the same time making it sound like you aren't.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, because you're explaining this very simple concept, but you're having it masquerade as being deep and like behind the layers or whatever.
Because you remove every other word that would tell the real story. You're like, now it is open to interpretation and artsy.
Yeah.
But I loved it because of the context in this film.
I agree. I like that's a good scene. My favorite scenes in the movie. One, I really enjoy the scene with well, it's technically two scenes, but I'll count it as one. I like the scene where Seymour and Enid are driving to the blues festival, and then the scene at the blues festival as well, for a couple different reasons. The main thing is that this really depicts how similar in some ways that Enid and Seymour are, and it's cool to see, interesting to see Enid react to Seymour's like over the top behavior, because she's always the one that's in the driver's seat of being chaotic and like expressing exactly what's on her mind and not caring what people think. But then he's in the car screaming at this family that's walking slowly and complaining about the music on the radio, and just is so simultaneously pretentious and hilarious and just like so over the top. And like you see like a connection between them in their views of the world and just like how much they hate certain things. And it's very funny. And then I do love the scene in the bar as well. Just for how awkward it is when he like the drink gets spilled on him, and just like the buildup is really good. And I think an underrated part of this joke in a way in the movie is, him seeing the opening act and, enjoying it. But then this stereotypically, he looks like he walked out of a Scooby-Doo movie, like early 2000s, right? Singing about picking cotton.
Yeah, Mark McGrath looking guy yelling about picking cotton. That was pretty funny.
So cringeworthy. It's so stupid. And everyone just in the bar just like dancing and getting into it. It's like, oh my God.
It's so good because I feel like even with like the cliche like version of this band, no one ever got nearly that far as to say that,
yeah.
Okay, we talked about like how you can't tell where this place is. The bar scene and having them cheer for football, but then showing like 4 different regions of football jerseys.
Oh, I didn't recognize that.
Yeah, they showed like a Broncos jersey, they showed a Saints jersey, they showed a Jaguars jersey, which that must have been brand new. And I think there was one West Coast team jersey shown, and I was like, oh, well, that didn't help. Come on.
Yeah, that's funny. That has to be. I feel like that's a good intentional thing, especially like comparing it to the Seymour license plate and just like not, just keeping it very vague.
We'll give you no hints. There will be none.
Yeah. Another scene I liked a lot. I'm trying to think. Trying to think of one that I was going to put one that has a different character relationship development, but I do got to continue with like the progression of Seymour's character and how Enid sees him. I do love the opening diner scene where they're, they invite him and they're observing him from afar. And you see like a shift in Enid's perspective of him. Cause like when he walks in, like he looks exactly like how she pictured him, but then like she does start to have sympathy and like an attachment to this weird guy in a way. And I really love this the joke where they're all sitting there and she sees him order a milkshake and she's like, oh my God, he just ordered a big glass of milk. And Josh is like, that's a vanilla milkshake.
Just showing like how little she has to connect people with, that she doesn't even know what a milkshake is. She's just like, that's milk. Ugh.
Yeah. Like she wants him. She's a preconceived notion of him walking in there and like just ordering a weird drink. And she just rolls with it, even though it's not what he does.
No, I agree. That was a great scene. That was wonderful because that also had the, oh my gosh, what is the line? I wrote this one down. He's insane. We should follow him home.
Yeah, that's immediately the contrast there. And I think I think it's in this scene as well where the Weird Al guy comes up and, in jest or not, like Becca's like, oh, I want to do him, and then or I want to make love to him, and then this is the classic like childish immaturity of like, oh, I'm going to tell the waiter that you said this, haha. It's like it just plays so well with what they're actually in the diner for, which is just to humiliate this guy. Like it's so immature, but like it's consistency in the character. I like that.
It's always so interesting to me too, because in that scene, it's like like she can't be seen liking something so much that even in this version of a joke, she can't have that joke said, because then he would think that she likes something.
Yeah. It's just, I like I said, I love characters that are unlikable or morally gray, and this movie is just chock full of just they're so obnoxious. They're such like teenagers, but like I love it. Even though like, their characters can be so annoying, I still love it. And I also kind of struggled with picking out favorite scenes, and because it just kind of flowed. But for my own personal immature reasons, I don't know why. I think it's maybe the framing of the two characters. Seymour's on the couch and his roommate is like in the hallway, but just that brief interaction where like Seymour's already super down and then his roommate comes in obnoxiously and is just like, oh, maybe, maybe she's got with that other guy. And then he farts. It just took me out of the scene in such a fucking funny way. I don't know why. It's just like the worst possible reaction he could have had in every single way is just there. Putting this idea in his head that he's, she's left him for Josh, and then he just audibly farts in a movie that has not had any fart humor is so funny.
I feel like it was it was funny, number one, but also number two, it really showed that like this guy also doesn't have it.
Yeah.
He don't have that emotional intelligence either. It's not there.
Yeah, you don't really clearly see that up until that point, and then it just hits you right on the head.
Mm-hmm. It's like we've been following him for some of the more deep emotional ideas that are going on, and then at that point you look at it, you're like, oh, we shouldn't have.
We shouldn't have. Never mind.
Nope.
Yeah.
That was not it. Okay, so let's talk about reviews of the film. I'll go ahead and go first. I'm not going to get super in depth because you've already heard me talk about this. But for story, I'm giving it a 4. Which is good, especially considering that like I think that there's a lot of elements of story that don't exist in this movie for a good reason, Mm-hmm. There, like we've talked about some things I wish I would have seen more of. Maybe acting, I'm giving it a 4. It kind of missed like that one super standout to me that would have like taken it over the top. However, I don't have any complaints about anyone, and I do think there were good elements. So sound 4. I wish they would have used it more. If they could have like found a way to incorporate the soundtrack a little bit more into the film, especially one that has so much relation to how music ostracizes or changes your like perception. I think I could have given it a 5 before. Otherwise, cinematography, creativity, 4. You might notice where this is going. This is like, it's a good movie. Editing is a 3, and I think we'd also talked about that. I don't really know how you change it. I just kind of wish it could change a little bit. So it's a 6, 7.5 out of 10. It's awesome score. Yeah, it was a good movie. I enjoyed it very much. Definitely one that I think rewatching it, I could pick up on some different things as well.
Yeah, I definitely I rewatched it again today, and I picked up on some more stuff. I'm pretty similar down the line as you. I think I would probably give the story a 4.5 on personal bias. I really love. It has a lot of elements of things that I personally love, which is like slice of life. Morally gray characters, and it's kind of encompasses a lot of my favorite things that I like in movies. So I give it a 4.5. I agree. Soundtrack would be a 4 because the music it does incorporate is really great. There's room there maybe for more, but it's still a solid 4 because it hits when it hits, it hits. Acting, I agree about 4, like solid, very solid performances across the board. And I will shout out Thora Birch is the standout, but I think she elevates it to a 4 and makes it like a very, very, very good ensemble. She adds to that. Creativity, cinematography, I'd give a 4 as well. I love the use of color, and especially the wardrobe changes and it really adds a lot, even though it doesn't really drive the narrative along. It does in some ways with like, the contrast in their outfits, but like it just looks really cool, and it keeps you engaged. Similar to the dialogue, even when scenes drag on, the use of color and the use of dialogue and funny quips really adds to the pacing. And with that, I would give the editing and pacing a 4. I think that there's nothing that I would really want to change, and I think it just works really well. Uh, as that slice of life kind of movie that I enjoy, and it happens to be like really funny too. So I think I'd land on about an 8 out of 10.
Solid. And I don't think there's any surprises there. This is a movie that's worth watching, especially if you're like getting into the early 2000s stuff, which I know is like a little more popular right now. But if you want to see where like indie movies kind of had their genesis, I was struggling hard to think of a movie earlier than this one that felt the same way that stuff like Juno later did.
Napoleon Dynamite really comes to mind too.
And so like, these films, they're well known, but they're like 2006, 2007. I can't remember exactly when Napoleon Dynamite did, somewhere around that time, but this is like a whole half decade before them, which also explains why it's not as large. Society wasn't exactly ready for it.
There's a lot of smart teen comedies that came out before this. I think like Clueless would be an example, but like a film like Clueless is still a quintessential like teen comedy. There's that genre that this movie just does not have. This is its own kind of thing, and it really is kind of the OG. I'm also struggling to think of other things that came before it.
And I mean that as like a huge compliment to it too, because this became such a large style when I was in high school. Like these movies were exploding, and then you had your Hey Ha music that came out at the same time, and this like just kind of predestined all of that in such a way that it feels like this was a movie that could have been made 5 years in the future and fit in perfectly, but instead, because it didn't, it just set a groundwork level for it, and then it lost best writing to Shrek. No, it didn't. It didn't lose it to Shrek. It lost it to A Beautiful Mind. It should have lost it to Shrek. No offense to this movie. It's hard to go against Shrek. So check it out, especially if you're into those indie movies, if you want to hear some more about it. Also, from my understanding, Willie definitely recommends Crumb. So
super recommend Crumb. You maybe have to be in the right emotional space to watch. It's a trip. Like it's a wild ride, but it's really masterful filmmaking. I also recently, I don't remember if I mentioned this or not, but I also recently watched Bad Santa, and Zwigoff has one other movie, Art School Confidential, that had generally favorable reviews. I have not seen it, but based on the 3 films that I've seen of his, Crumb into this Bad Santa, like he's surprisingly up there in some of my favorite directors. Obviously, small sample size bias, but like he's really hit for me in all of his films. So
it's interesting to me being in high school after this. You have no idea the amount of times Bad Santa was on Comedy Central. All the time, like over and over and over again. Didn't matter what year, right? And like I had never even heard of Ghost World. Crumb I had heard of. Ghost World kind of just like vanished. Who knows? Yes. So thank you again, Willie. We always appreciate you.
Of course.
Thanks for recommending the movie. The next film we are doing is going to be the 2002 movie Cypher, from the director Vincenzo Natali. He is, of course, famous for Cube, Splice, In the Tall Grass, etc., etc., etc. Cypher is a 2002 film that kind of gets looked over, but it's we'll talk about it. And we get to talk about it in VR, so check out this next interview. And if you are listening on the podcast, I highly suggest checking out the new YouTube for the new one. It'll be me and Janice in the world that Janice made. Let's check it out. But until you hear us there, just remember, you can't score a home run without swinging a bat.